Okay, we can communicate more later. Yeah, I will sit here.
Dear participants, we will begin our program shortly. Please take your seats and make yourself comfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now convening to our second town hall session, which is the budget town hall session. The session will be moderated by Ms. Siti Shamim, Hayas Development Department Director of the Continuous Professional Development Division. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to the session's moderator, Ms. Siti Shamim, and the speakers.
Thank you so much for the MC. A very warm welcome to all of our participants today. How was your lunch just now? It was really good. A little bit sleepy. You should have seen our breakfast. It was nasi lemak. Okay, so hi, my name is Siti Shamim. I'm currently the Director of Development for Higher Education Malaysia Association in Continuous Professional Development team. Okay, so now we have our speakers for budget town hall session. I think this is like the most awaited session upon hearing our budget yesterday, the budget bill that has been presented. I believe all of you guys have been listening to the budget and have been reading the budget bill themselves. So can I see a show of hands who has been reading the budgets? Wow, wow. Okay, you can claim a free afternoon tea after this. I think everyone will have to claim it lah. Okay, so now we'll be going to the speakers. We have the most lovely Miss Beatrice Chong over here, the Senior Manager for Economic Policy and Sustainability and Climate for PwC Malaysia. Prior joining to PwC, Beatrice was based in Germany and South Korea, where she worked on climate and sustainability policy development and implementation. She has led and implemented various projects funded in integrated urban development, electric mobility, circular cities to climate adaptation projects. Ms. Beatrice also worked at Rambo Malaysia, where she performed specialized environmental and social studies for multinationals across the Asia-Pacific region. So I'm telling you their background so you can feel your questions, and then after this you can ask them. Okay? So beside me, we have Prof. Dr. On Kyang Min from Taylor's University. He is currently the Director of the Philosophy, Politics and Economics program at Taylor's University, Malaysia. Do you have your students here?
The program hasn't started yet.
I see, okay. Okay, MQA code. After this can go in the program. So he was a Senior Visiting Fellow at ICEAS, Yusof Ishak Institute, and he previously served as the Deputy Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry Malaysia. So very important portfolio here. Prior to being elected into public office, he was a lecturer and political analyst at UCSI University. I think we have a show of hands of UCSI students here. Okay. And then we have our last speaker, Dr. Yasuhiko Matsuda. Dr. Yasuhiko Matsuda is the World Bank Country Manager for Malaysia, leading the team based at the World Bank Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Finance Hub in Kuala Lumpur. Dr. Matsuda is an expert on public sector governance and human development, primarily in service delivery for social protection, education and health, with over 25 years of experience. That's the same as my age. In various roles in the World Bank, okay? I'm young.
You're young, but you shouldn't mention that.
I'm so sorry. Dr. Matsuda had taken up various roles in development and piloting of outcome-oriented public expenditure and institutional reviews that focus on select human capital issues. Okay, so we will go into the important questions. I will be giving a few questions for the speakers, and then we will open the floor for Q&A session. So I believe you guys can start thinking of your questions now, and don't shoot, okay. So I believe we will start with Dr. Yasuhiko Matsuda first. So upon hearing about the national budgets, throughout the years, how can the national budgets best address the socio-economic needs of different segments in society?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I had a chance to sit and listen to the previous session and when the Q&A was going on, and it was very, very energetic and energizing, slightly intimidating, the passionate questions coming. Questioning the prophets and so on. I am the World Bank representative, so, I'm sure some of you have some questions to ask, but please be gentle with me. So about the budget, one thing I've noticed about the budget here in Malaysia, and I haven't really had a chance to study the latest one that came out yesterday in detail, but in general, it's very detailed. The long speech, many things are mentioned, and it's a little difficult to, at least for me, coming from outside, decipher what are the main thrusts of the budget strategy maybe. And I know that this government has laid out a number of announcements, MADANI and new industrial master plan, the substantial revision to the 12th Malaysia plan, new energy transformation roadmap, all these things, and it's quite a job to kind of pull all these things together into coherent, clear strategy. And so, from the media reporting of the budget that I picked up since this morning, so, I don't have my own judgment, but I'm very curious as to, what the pundits, here in Malaysia are thinking. I think what's important is for the budget as a key policy document to reflect the government's policy intention, right? And I know that quite a bit of emphasis is placed on, for example, fiscal responsibility. And there's been clamor for certain kinds of more taxes to be increased. And I think part of the concerns is about fiscal sustainability. There's a certain level of public debt, certain amount of public deficit, government deficit. So there's a concern about, making sure that these things do not get out of control. And some of you who have an image about the World Bank may think, oh yeah, the World Bank surely must be worried about this, the country's ability to repay loans and so on. We're not, partly because we're not lending to Malaysia, but also because, it looks to us that the debt is so far sustainable, right? So, and the deficit has been manageable, partly thanks to Petronas, right? So that wouldn't be the reason why we would worry about the level of taxation. Quick propaganda. This week we came up with or last week, or this week still, I guess, with our new Malaysia Economic Monitor. And so I do encourage you to take a quick look at this report. It talks about macroeconomic developments and so on, but it has a special section that discusses the impact of fiscal policy instruments, taxation transfers and subsidies in particular, on poverty and inequality. And the headline finding based on what we analyzed on Malaysia's fiscal policy instruments and also in comparison to other countries is that Malaysia's fiscal policy instruments do a pretty good job reducing poverty and inequality, but they could do more because other countries do more. And one key difference is that the government doesn't have enough fiscal resources to allocate to social spending, health, education, social protection, these are the ones. So if you collect more revenues, and if you had the vision of using fiscal policy instruments for poverty and inequality reduction, there's more that the government could do with the additional resources rather than worrying about the public debt, which does need to be controlled. Yeah, but for the time being, it looks to me like a secondary concern. So then, again, I did look at it. The successive budget speeches that I've seen, always talk about rakyat and so on. But the question is, do you have a fundamental sort of policy that really addresses structural challenges that are at the basis of, people's, well-being, income distribution, and the wage growth and so on. So that's sort of the way that we're looking at the budgets in Malaysia from the point of view of inequality. That's not the only objective. The budget also has to do other things like promote economic growth, right? And so sometimes these objectives can conflict with each other, and balancing those different objectives is the government's judgment. But at least focusing on the inequality side, it looks to us like you need more revenue, and that's why we have been calling for more revenue, whatever by whatever means, and we can discuss the details as to what those options could be. But so that's my opening spiel.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's a very great input and how you perceive the national budget as a whole and how the revenues itself is very important for Malaysian perspectives. And then you talked about the balancing on the revenues and how it could be an effect to all the rakyats here in Malaysia. So according to that, like following that, I would like to ask Prof. Ong Ken Ming, does the current budget effectively address the demands of modern flexible work arrangements, in your opinion, in order to facilitate the establishment of secondary income sources?
I think when it comes to promoting certain flexible work arrangements, there are already existing policies that have been promoted by agencies such as Talent Corp. I do not think that there were additional tax incentives for companies to, encourage more flexible working arrangements, because each company is different. And I think the situation post-COVID has been such that it's quite interesting to see the kind of push and pull by companies as well as employees. So companies actually want more people to go back to physical workplace. I'm not sure how it's like in PwC, but the employees will be saying, actually, you have to give us at least 2 days where we work from home, right? So you're full-time now, right? In the office now, right? Yeah. So I think, we've sort of like gone back to the old norm. But I do think that there's, especially in light of the new generation in terms of how you guys like to work, there should be this kind of flexibility being offered, whereby you at least have 1 day where you can work from home, you can work in a cafe somewhere, you can go to any other co-working space that you are willing to contribute to and you like the environment. There's one quite nice space here in Common Ground. So I think those kind of flexibilities will still be there. But I do not think that the government and even companies should necessarily be in a position to want to encourage flexible working conditions whereby you are forced to take a second job, right? So, I don't think we should be in a situation whereby people have to go and drive Grab to supplement their income because they don't have enough to eat, right? I think that may have been the case during COVID, but now that we've passed that, I think there should be, emphasis on the part of the government to create good jobs, high-paying jobs, have good social safety nets, whereby, you don't have to resort to having additional work arrangements. And if you do that, it's because you really want to go out there and hustle, right? So, right now, all the students here, I hope that you guys are not in a situation where you have to go out and hustle, but focus your efforts in terms of getting a good degree, getting good internships, and also getting jobs that will give you the kind of trajectory and career growth in places like PwC, for example, where you have a good career prospect moving forward. and not forgetting the World Bank, of course. Yeah.
Okay, there's a slight promotion there. And then you can go into Taylor's to have a very talented...
No, if you take the PP program next year, the chances of you to be able to go and get these kind of jobs will also be elevated.
Yes, okay. Promotion. I give some time for promotion. Thank you so much, Prof. Ong. I think it's very insightful that our youth generations would... Of course, we like flexible working hours. We love work from home. I think it's from the indication of prolonging COVID-19, where we have lockdown, and all of us have been very, very suitable and comfortable being at home. So we want.
Can I take a straw poll here? Maybe more applies to it's more applicable to the guys. If let's say you don't have to go to school or to work, how many of you would be distracted by things like your computer games at home, Netflix, PS5, PS4? How many? Okay lah, the rest are all lying lah.
Very good people. They're just very, very intrigued and to looking at other people and how they responded. But we have been talking into the terms of education. We have talking into the terms of talent and how people perceive the budget into working arrangement and employability. So let's talk about something very close to our session just now, the previous session, on sustainability. So when they're addressing the budget bill 2024 that was presented yesterday, so are there any specific measures in the budget that aimed in sustainability and climate change?
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much for having me as well. So definitely the budget, there are many things that are sort of like touch upon climate and sustainability, especially with the new energy transition roadmap being launched, as well as the new industrial manufacturing and plan being launched as well. So like the budget has also looked into how to implement those by putting budget into it. So for example, for NETR, they have looked at about 2 billion ringgit, and also to collaborate with private financial institutions to raise about another 200 billions as well. And of course, in terms of, let's say, like nature and conservation, so the budget has raised about from 150 million ringgit to 200 million ringgit on ecological fiscal transfers. For those who do not know what EFTs are, so basically it is a kind of financing mechanism where the national government provides to state governments for conservation efforts. So the question and the trick here is more like implementation. So one of the work that we have done with a state government looking to EFTs is that how the state has received the money, but they do not know how to use it. They do not know how to develop projects for it. So it is still sitting in the state coffer. So with the raise, I think it is a positive signal, but of course, capacitating the states to use it as well is also quite important. And we have seen quite positive movement also on carbon projects. I think perhaps some of you may know that Bursa has this platform for carbon credits to trade. And right now they are also giving like tax incentives as well for companies to develop good projects for carbon market also. So there are also many other tax incentives that have been continued, like EV taxes and things like that. And I think one positive thing that has been introduced also is on ESG. So, because I think even in the previous session we talked about sustainability costs and then whether it is profitable as well. So yes, many SMEs or MSMEs, they have to look into ESG compliance reporting. So government is also providing such kind of tax return also for companies. So these are some of the things that have been seen and introduced in the budget that is there. For implementation, I think the focus is.
I think that's a very great informative fact that you have been looking at. I see it's also in the budget bill 2024, they also talked about the scheme galakan penggunaan motosikal elektrik, where there's the adoption of electrical motorcycles.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be a very big importance in the sustainability and climate education?
So whenever we talk about, let's say, transport decarbonization, I think we look at it from different perspectives. Like, of course, transition to EVs are important. It also helps to reduce not just like greenhouse gas emissions, but also to improve air pollution as well. But what is critical is also the model shift, the way the behavior from, let's say, using a private vehicle to, let's say, public transportation. So that shift is really important, and that also relates to how cities are being planned, how accessible and safe are our public transportation systems. So I think it comes in a bigger picture of God. But of course, that is a positive move. But we shouldn't stop there. I think it should be a more sustainable kind of sustainable mobility type of perspective whenever we look into transport decarbonization. Yeah.
Actually, on that point, I think as the government tries to introduce incentives for EVs, one very big challenge for the government would be to, introduce the rationalization of the petrol subsidies. I think this is something that's been talked about for a long time. I think that many people were expecting this to be part and parcel of the budget announcement, but I think it was an opportunity lost for the Prime Minister not to include details of petrol subsidy rationalization in the budget. The only thing that was talked about was diesel, phase withdrawal of the diesel subsidy. This would affect mostly people in the private commercial transportation sectors in Peninsular Malaysia, as well as some people in Sabah and Sarawak who use your Hilux for diesel to go into the rural areas. So that's necessary, but I think the bigger challenge is the petrol subsidy, which wasn't mentioned in the budget.
Thank you so much for the additional information. I think during the budgets we heard about, I think previous talks about all the subsidies for rice, subsidies for food, a lot of subsidies for petrol. there's a diesel subsidies on that with the budget bill. So I would like to ask Dr. Yasuhiko, how can the government actually strike a balance between providing subsidies and actually maintaining the fiscal responsibility?
Okay, so it's a hot topic, and I think, and I hope that a lot of you have thought about this. To put it very simply and bluntly, you cannot balance fiscal responsibility with something like generalized subsidies. And the reason is because it's automatic, right? Once you set it, the government doesn't have a control. Once the oil prices goes up, then the subsidy kicks in, as the difference between the price at the pump and whatever the price that the Petronas or Petron or whatever the petrol stations are paying, right? And then some of that comes back as increased tax, but there's a delay, and so you lose control of fiscal management. And the similar things happens with other subsidies as well. So it's really not an effective mechanism from the point of view of fiscal control. And there are ways to achieve similar objectives by other means, and many other countries are doing it or trying to do it. Many countries are struggling as well, because once people get used to something like cheaper petrol price at the pump, it becomes very difficult to get them to used to the market price, right? And so everywhere it becomes a political hot potato. But I come from a country that doesn't produce oil, and then petrol is at market price, and we get used to it. And one of the things that happens over time, once you get used to it, that you don't use cars as much, because it's just so expensive. It's not only the cars, but all the other things related to it becomes expensive, like highway tolls and things. So there's a cumulative knock-on effect on people's behavior. And this morning, you were very passionately talking about sustainability issues. That would be a very potent tool. So there would be additional benefit beyond a balance in the budget. But just purely from the point of view of balance in the budget, that's really a difficult thing. And I think that's why the government has been trying to do it, and there's been so much talk about it, right? But alternative is the target cash transfer. That's what most countries try to do. We did an estimate of the poverty reduction impact of fuel subsidies and the targeted cash transfer here in Malaysia using data from 2019. And this is in the report that I talked about a while ago. So I'm still continuing my marketing pitch here, but Malaysia last year spent about 3% of GDP on subsidies, right? And when the team did the estimate, the assumption was that it would reach about 2.4% of GDP. So that's the number we're using. And with it, the poverty level decreased. Yes, it does reduce poverty because it prevents poor people from having to spend money on fuel and chicken and eggs and so on by 1 percentage point. Poverty rate is about 6-7%, right, in Malaysia. So this reduced it by about 1 percentage point. Cash transfer in Malaysia, it was about 1% of GDP in 2019. To be frank, cash transfers in Malaysia are not very efficiently run. There are many of them. There's leakage and so on. And yet, with 1% of GDP, the poverty reduction impact was 1.7. Okay, so with the 1/3 of the cost, almost double the impact, right? So if you improved targeting, delivery, and so on of cash transfers, you can get a lot more bang for the buck in reducing poverty. So you can balance the budget that way. And now the middle class, they will complain. People who can actually afford it will complain. And that's the political challenge that I think government faces. But you need to decide what the priorities are. Because one good thing about the budget is that it forces the government and society to prioritize, because you have the limited resources, right? If you think that the resources are unlimited, you don't prioritize and you go for everything, right? So you need to use that discipline, I think, to come up with political policy priorities. Then it can be done. Although easier said than, the YB used to be, politics, so he can correct me. Okay, it's not that easy, but at least, philosophically, and practically speaking, countries in other places have shown that there are ways to do this.
Actually, the political challenges can be managed if you show, for example, for, let's say, taking away the petrol subsidy in a gradual way, the amount that you pay back to the B40 and to a lesser extent the M40 communities can be more than the amount that you save. Can be more than the amount that you spend on the petrol subsidies. Then actually people will be able to see that, yeah, it was a pretty inefficient way of doing things, because you're subsidizing people who are driving BMWs, Mercedes, who take long trips to go up to Penang and things like that. Not to say those things are not good. You can do that. You know, it generates tourism revenue and things like that. But it needs to be you know, costed properly. And part and parcel of that challenge would be to face the political music and do what's necessary for the benefit of the country in the long run.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yasuhiko and Prof. Ong, for the additional, for the informations. I believe what we have been talking about, how subsidies are giving off more importance to the B40 and then the M40 sections of the group. But I would like to ask, do you think, Prof. Ong, do you think that the subsidies will lead to overdependence and hinder economic growth, or are they necessary for the social welfare?
I think we need to differentiate between targeted and non-targeted subsidies. I think non-targeted subsidies, general subsidies, lead to the general impression that you know, oil and petrol is will remain at 205 forever in perpetuity, without realizing that there's sort of like changes in the global prices. I think for the targeted subsidies, yes, you should have them to help certain groups, but you should also be able to measure the effectiveness of the subsidies that you are given. So I'll give you an example. There are targeted subsidies in the area of paddy planting, you know, and this is from personal experience. Part of that subsidies is channeled towards giving the farmers free or heavily subsidized fertilizer. What happens is that the fertilizer that is given to the farmers are of such poor quality, because it's like free, you know, that a lot of farmers actually either don't use it, or if they do use it, they need to buy additional fertilizer to supplement the fertilizer that they've been given by the government. And of course, whoever is producing that fertilizer charges the government above market prices, and ends up, this is a very inefficient way of giving subsidies to help that targeted group. There have been think tanks such as Ideas and Kazana Research Institute that have suggested subsidies that are more related to output targets, for example, rather than just to give blanket subsidies based on fertilizer or other price support mechanisms. So there are ways in which we can improve the existing subsidy structure. I'm sure the World Bank also will have their own inputs in these areas, but the government needs to be able to be willing to listen, number one. Secondly, they need to be able to have the political will to be able to change some of the existing structures, right? So, for example, there are monopolies that control, for example, the importation of rice. Bernas has been given that responsibility. Should those kinds of arrangements continue? You know, that's where the hard political decisions need to be made on the part of the government.
Thank you. I believe there's a lot of hard decisions to be made in the political sense. I think what I quoted what Dr. Yasuhiko said before. There are things that the governments are doing something in tackling a few matters, but there are things that they can do more. Okay. Then I would like to ask Ms. Beatrice, in your point of view, because you have been in previous countries before, in the consulting areas for PwC as well. So how does Malaysia compare to other countries in Southeast Asia in terms of providing equal opportunities for its citizens?
Okay, thanks for that. I think in general, I would say that Malaysians as a whole, we do have our basic needs are fulfilled. Let's say, yeah, we do have access to education, healthcare, you know, with public healthcare system, job opportunities. But in order to change, I think it is to not be stuck in this like middle income country. It is the quality. So there is, yes, there's basic access to the basic needs, but then access to quality education quality, let's say, healthcare, then it differs according to, let's say, you know, urban and rural. Let's say depends on the let's say business size as well, or even, you know, among male and female as well. So I think to change towards that quality access is what the country still needs to, let's say, focus on. So I think, for example, like, let's say in this sustainability and climate world, right, we look at, I think the most recent flood in 2021. So I just saw recently the DOSM report that the impact, I was so surprised to see that the impact in Selangor is 10 times less than, let's say, Terengganu. Terengganu suffered about 250 million ringgit of economic value lost because of flood, whereas people in Selangor, they suffered just, let's say, 20 million. Of course, it is still a huge amount, but in comparison with, let's say, in the states that are in the East Coast, it is still unequal in that sense. And then when we look, I think in the World Bank as well, there's this climate risk projection. It looks at, let's say, the flood and also climate impact, say, in the Borneo region, it would be higher compared to, let's say, Peninsula. So there's such kind of like inequality, and how prepared are we to also to address that? And with SMEs as well, MSMEs, how ready are they to also face a regulatory kind of change if that all these expectations from financiers that they need to look at, you know, all this access to finance that are not so fossil based, you know, all these things they need to be support as well for those SMEs. So I would say that yes, the basic needs are covered, but the quality and also like the outcome as well is still a bit not so equal. There's this disparity, so we need to also focus and address that as well. Yeah.
Just to add one point, since Beatrice brought up the issue of the floods, I had a conversation with a guy who runs who's in the C-suite of an insurance company, and you know, I asked him to crunch some numbers, and he showed me that in 2022, the premium paid for flood insurance actually increased in places that were affected in Selangor, like Taman Sri Muda. And then I would have anticipated that the amount would have reduced in 2023 because people forget the flood and things like that. But he told me the premiums in 2023 kept up and kept pace, right? So there's that kind of social protection, this kind of private insurance accessibility that people in the urban area can have access to. But I think if he would have run the numbers in Kelantan and Terengganu, you probably would see not much increase because they don't have that kind of financial capacity to insure themselves against these kinds of flooding situations. So that's the social protection part from an inequality standpoint also must be taken into account in these areas.
So meaning to say that we can see there are inequalities even in Malaysia themselves. Like the East Coast will have a different capacity and different economical impact when such matters arises, but which differs from KL areas, Klang Valley areas when it happens. So I would like to talk about I think the proposals before budget bill has been presented. We heard about Malaysia Ekonomi MADANI from our Prime Minister previously, and then we also talked about the NETR, National Energy Transition Roadmap. So let's first go to the MADANI economy from Dr. Yasuhiko point of view. How does Malaysia's current fiscal capacity aligns with the goals of MADANI economy, and what adjustments may be necessary?
Okay. One thing that stood out in my reading and my understanding of Madani is the strong focus on social justice, equality. There's a lot of emphasis on non-economic aspects as well as philosophy, morality, and so on. But I understand that that also translates when it comes to economic policy into considerations and concern about the vulnerable, the poor, the disadvantaged. So I think that's a remarkably strong characteristic of Madani, different from some of the other, I think, government pronouncement. At least that's how I see it. Now, so then I already made a point that, you know, to reduce inequality using fiscal policy, and it's not the only way to do it, but it's actually, in the short run, one of the most effective way. You know, the Malaysian government could use higher fiscal capacity, right? It's doing. Let me step back. So Malaysia historically was a remarkable example of high growth with reduction in poverty and inequality, right? And even for the last decade or so, inequality was coming down, and then it stopped a few days before the pandemic. It kind of got stalled, and there is a sign that maybe it's beginning to tick up again. I think that pandemic increased the inequality in all likelihood, right? So it's important to take control of that trend and then reverse it and bring it back to the reduction pattern again. So you need a little bit of a push there, I think. And so, again, in the short run, using efficiently tools such as transfers might be a way to go. Now, there's a concern that certain types of tax are regressive. So GST is often criticized for this reason. The first point I was trying to make was, and I would like to emphasize this again, usually countries reduce inequality using fiscal policy tools not by way of taxation. Right? Taxation is not a means for redistribution. Taxation is a means for revenue, resource mobilization, right? You tax the economy because you need to capture resources that you can use for different purposes, building infrastructure, or providing incentives for private sector firms to innovate and export and so on, and also provide basic public services that the poor people in particular benefit from. So, it's the expenditure side that typically does the trick of reducing poverty and inequality. And what you want to look at is the overall impact. Combining taxes and transfers and other kinds of spending. In the long run, it's the better education, better access to job, high wages and so on that get people out of poverty, and then doing that across different population segments and location, and then you reduce inequality, right? But in the short run, the transfers in particular play a big role. Now, so I think you need a better, strong fiscal capacity. Inequality is relatively high for Malaysia, in Malaysia compared to other similar countries, upper middle income countries, especially high income countries. And the geographic inequality is stark. So we've been saying for some time, Malaysia is going to reach the high income status as we define it. It's just a statistical artifact. Your life is not going to change, once you reach the threshold, but we will classify you as a high income economy once you reach that point, maybe in the next few years or so. Yet, only 2 or 3 states will reach that, right? Among 13. It would take Kelantan, the poorest, another 30 years to cross that threshold if Kelantan grew at 5% every year. 5% every year. Has Kelantan ever grown at 5%? My understanding is no. Right? So it's a tall order. And so it requires some extra push to redress this kind of geographic as well as other forms of inequality. And again, you don't want to rely entirely on government interventions and fiscal policies as well, because you do need the private sector to do its part in a major way. But the government has a role to play, and for that, I think more fiscal capacity is necessary.
Can I just ask Yasu a question on maybe a more technical issue for the enlightenment of the students here? You mentioned that maybe only a couple of states would reach the status of a high-income nation. So the way World Bank would measure that would be looking at GDP per capita. GNI per capita. And GNI per capita would include things like, for example, the income earned by large corporations as well, correct?
Yes. So it's not all. So it's not all income of the people. Yeah, that's true. And that's why, for example, Sarawak, with high poverty, is up there. And in fact, this year it happens to cross the threshold, because of the oil revenues and so on. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So for your benefit, GNI or GDP per capita will capture all of the economic activity, by both individuals as well as corporations and also the government. There's also another measure in terms of something that's maybe more relevant to you guys, which would be the National Household Income and Survey report, whereby the Department of Statistics will actually go out and poll and ask people what is their average wage, or what is their wage, for example. And then you'll be able to get the average wage, which is on a nationwide capacity basis, a little bit over 2,000 ringgit per person. So GDP per capita would be much higher. I think the latest figures, from end of 2022 showed that we are over 50,000 ringgit Malaysia already, which, if you go by the World Bank definition, either 48,000 ringgit or 12,000 US dollars, depending on what exchange rate you use. We've already reached there or getting there already. But in terms of average wages, only about 32 to 35% of the GDP actually goes to wages, which is something that you guys should be concerned about, because that's how much money you'll get when you start working after you graduate. Yeah. So some technical elements.
This is the lecturer side of him, the lecturer of Taylor's University in economics. Thank you so much for enlightening us into the economic side of the taxes, of the Ekonomi MADANI part from Dr. Yasuhiko. I also I was intrigued when hearing the trend of inequality previously before the lockdowns, the pandemic. I think the pandemic really takes up a lot of our time, like the one whole year being missing for that part. And it's true, it's not going to be a very easy pathway to build back the patchwork after. But as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I think all of us should be together and try to stop the inequality, particularly in our side of matters. So let's talk about the NETR, the National Energy Transition Roadmap. So Ms. Beatrice, with your background in sustainability, with the National Energy Transition Roadmap ongoing, in what ways can this initiative be a positive impact and for the well-being and sustainable development of Malaysia?
So in terms of like the NETR, I think what it has identified is like the 6 levers for growth, like hydrogen, CCUS, and all this. So since many of you are students, of course you would want to see where the nation is going and where can you tap onto it as well. So of course for that to happen, you definitely need a lot of talent. And whether are we skilled enough, because traditionally Malaysia has been so strong on fossil, oil and gas industry, but are we ready to pivot towards like this new growth sectors? So this is where Malaysians, and even young people, I would encourage you to reskill, to upskill, or to look into that as well. And if you do look into that, I think NETR has also mentioned about the potential job opportunities that it will create by 2030 or up to 2050. So there is a huge impact for, let's say, for the young people like yourself. And another aspect is also like, it is also really important for Malaysia as we are so dependent on, let's say, oil and gas, Petronas for our, let's say, budget or our nation growth. How can we really pivot, right? So are we ready to tap into all these things, and how would that impact the daily Malaysians, let's say, in terms of our nation's strength and also in terms of our behavior as well? So how can we look into that? So definitely the NETR, let's say it's just a roadmap, but the opportunities there for you to really tap into it in terms of skills, in terms of job opportunities, and also to change our behavior as well. Because yes, renewable energy is a sector of growth, but when we look at energy efficiency, it really talks about our behavior. So that's where Malaysians can also participate on how to relook into how we consume energy. Like coming back to Malaysia, one thing that I really noticed is that why are the aircons so cold in all the buildings, right? Whereas let's say in Korea, there is always a limit, 25 degrees, it is mandated. So this is all energy conservation kind of like opportunities as well. So that's where how we as Malaysians can also participate. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think I've heard that a few of the government sectors are not using aircons anymore in support of the sustainability growth and to control the climate changes. So we will go on to the last question before we move to the Q&A session. So Prof. Ong, when hearing about the NETR, so what benchmarks or indicators that you think can be used to measure the success of sustainability initiative in improving people's life?
Measurement of success. I think this is quite a broad area. Probably need to break it down into different components. So one area where there's a lot of corporate involvement that we've seen is with regards to the public listed companies. So all of the public listed companies are mandated to produce a ESG report. And a corollary of this would be, because there's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 reporting, a lot of the supply chain sort of like providers to the listed companies would then also have to step up their game and to participate in this kind of ESG reporting. In the area of manufacturing, for example, the government under MITI announced something called the Industry ESG Framework. Basically a way in which you can have some sort of education process for the SMEs in the manufacturing sector to learn how to report so that they can align with some of the larger objectives that are happening among the public listed companies. And the other area I see a lot of activity, moving in this area would be in the area of financing. A lot of banks these days are moving towards their own net zero targets. So for example, next week, a plug for an event that's going to be organized here in Taylor's called the Malaysian Finance Association Conference, International Conference. We have the Chief Sustainability Officer from OCBC coming to speak to us, and there are 6 areas in which OCBC has identified where they have certain measurements in which they want to move towards net zero by different time frames. So one very obvious example would be in the power and energy sector. OCBC has come out to say that we will not finance or be involved in any of the financing to build new coal-powered power stations. So this is something that I think other financing institutions are also moving towards. So I think I see a lot of activity in the private sector side. I think in terms of the NGOs, in terms of the individuals, there are different smaller initiatives that are being undertaken, but I don't see there to be a more consolidated effort being undertaken by either these smaller initiatives or by the government, either at the state or the federal level, to give them sort of like a further push or further incentives. Maybe that will come later, but I think the major thing would be in the private sector side. Maybe just as a final plug, I think if the government can do more to encourage people to take public transportation, especially in the Klang Valley, that will also have an impact in terms of the ESG kind of environmental impact with regards to the usage of fossil fuels.
Thank you so much for Prof. Ong for enlightening the question. Of course, I think our participants is well prepared with their questions now, and they also have a few things in their mind to opt for a better Malaysia. So that's where our breakout sessions will be coming in after this. So do prepare with your ideas, with your discussions in our breakout sessions. So before we ended our session, we will be opening up the floor for question and answer session. So I believe we have a first question. Yes, okay, so fast. Okay, Miss Nadia.
Okay, hello. My name is Nadia. I'm a master's graduate from Queen Mary University of London. To be honest, I was expecting more from the budget bill that was announced by our Prime Minister yesterday. So my question to the speakers, the failure rate of SMEs in Malaysia is alarming, and it is estimated 60% of the new SMEs fail within 5 years of establishment. So how can Malaysia SMEs, who are expected to be the backbone of Malaysia's GDP, be supported in terms of funding and support in starting up? And secondly, my second question is that PM has also announced that the B40 recipients will receive 100 ringgit per month for a period of 12 months. And personally, from your point of view, will that be enough to cover the current minimum wage of 1,500 ringgit per month to cover the current rising cost of living? And do you think should the government come up with a better strategy and solutions to overcome poverty in the long run instead of giving the one-offs? So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the question. I'm glad that I'm not one of the speakers because I don't know how to answer that. So can we have maybe Prof. Ong, do you want to take? Okay, we will collect the few questions and then we will go into, from that side please.
Hi, my name is Amira. I'm from IIUM. So I actively joined a volunteering program that focus more on Aboriginal people in village. So just short questions. What is your opinion regarding about Aboriginal people economic and how to elevate their salary income, which is they hardly to increase their income because most of them around like 300 or maybe 100 ringgit per a month. So since and also since most of them live in the forest, which is far from the city, their home and their place affected by the logging that happen that created by our local people. So I think that things that I want to know from your perspective, how we want to help them, which is it will affect it in the future. So that's all from me.
Thank you. Okay, one more.
Ganesha from Asia School of Business. I'm a senior research associate. So just ask, why is Malaysia having so much issues in terms of getting grants or funds from international institutions? One of the things that I know is because Malaysia is considered an upper middle income country. One of the issues is because we are not a poor economy, we can't get aid, and we are not a rich economy where we can finance our own transition. So we are basically caught in the middle income trap. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Okay, I think we have additional questions. Maybe we answer the ones that have been answered first. Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer two questions. The one on the funding that's given to the B40. Just want to clarify, the 100 ringgit for 12 months is actually not given to the B40. Nadia, is it? It's given to what the government calls the hardcore poor or miskin tegah. Right, this is a subset of the Sumbangan Tunai Rumah program. Whereas the Sumbangan Tunai Rumah Ramat program is for all those earning below 4,000 ringgit, and then also the M40 as well. The SARA is actually specifically targeted to the hardcore poor and those who are registered under the e-Kase program, so about 700,000 of them. I think with regards to these hardcore poor recipients, you really need to do a deep dive in terms of why are they in that category. Is it because of certain disabilities which prevent them from working? Is it because of certain health issues? And I've seen this with my own eyes when I was MP, whereby you have people who have had accidents, going to work, coming back from work in their motorcycles, or they have kencing manis, diabetes. They're not able to work. They have to go to dialysis on a regular basis, right? So for these kinds of hardcore poor, they need to have some sort of assistance from government, whether it's from the SARA program, whether it's from per queso. This is something that I think any decent society would want to provide in terms of the basic minimum. Whether 100 ringgit is enough or not, I think really depends on the family structure, the support system that these people will be getting from other sources, from zakat and whatnot as well. So that's where I think access to the data at a granular level is very important. The second question I want to ask is with regards to what to do to help and assist the Aboriginal or the Orang Asli people. Maybe the focus would be more on Peninsular Malaysia because that's where most of the Orang Asli are located. I would say that to answer this question, we should not have the mindset that us in the urban areas or Orang kat bandar, we necessarily know what is in the best interest of the Orang Asli people. It may not necessarily be income, even though that may help them in certain ways. it may be in the area of what you mentioned just now. They just want their own environment to be protected. You know, they do not want it to be overlogged. They want certain access in terms of roads. You know, they want perhaps decent enough infrastructure with regards to school facilities nearby, and you know, they also don't want too much interference, I think, from JACOA or other government agencies to go and interfere in their lives, right? So I think we should not have a very condescending attitude, you know, and I've seen this happen myself, whereby we go in and then we dictate, this is good for you, this is not good for you, this is what you need to do, you need to do X, Y, and Z. It's always a very tricky issue, and I think it's much better for us to understand their needs first before we can really understand what are the things that we can do to allow them to live a life of dignity.
Thank you, Prof. Ong, for answering the question. Maybe, yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay, I think somebody should talk about that. But so SME, even though I think Meteor might better qualified to talk about it. So I don't know if 60% is too much, too little, because you don't need all the startup SMEs to succeed, right? You know, because you do need competition over the long run for the economy to be vibrant. So if people are failing but finding another way to succeed, that's one thing. Of course, the pretext of the question seems to be that that's not what's happening, right? So, you know, that's probably a different question. I know that the government has a lot of programs to support SMEs. We did a report a few years ago about government support for digitalizing SMEs, for example, and found that, I think it was 2019, something like that, alone, more than 100 new programs by government started, big and small, by all kinds of agencies. Obviously, these are not coordinated, but one thing that really strikes me here in Malaysia, to be honest, compared to a number of other countries that I've worked in, is that there's no evaluation, at least ones that are publicly available. And it's actually precisely these kinds of programs that need to be transparently evaluated, because money is being poured in, often fairly small amount by program, you know, in the big scheme of things, you know, I don't know, 10 million there, a few hundred million there, you know, you have a budget of what, you know, 300-400 billion ringgit, right? So, you know, even a few hundred million is a very small amount, you know, in the overall scheme of things. And they're spread across a large number of programs. This isn't, you know, it's probably still in this budget. You know, I think they were in the previous budgets too. And I'm not aware that there's public information about the effectiveness of these programs. So, you know, until you have that, it's really difficult to figure out what really works and what other types of programs that address the needs of the SMEs or any beneficiaries of government interventions. One survey data that we picked up, we used to run a survey during COVID of different private sector firms, that lots of grants are available, but many small firms in particular don't know how to make use of the money. So they need coaching, technical assistance, and so on. And that's not easily available because that requires human resources on the side of the providers, right? Either directly by the government or maybe contractors, you know. But often that's the key, you know, for SMEs. And many of them would say in a survey response that they don't need to digitalize, you know. So there's a lack of awareness on their part as well. And so it requires a lot of awareness raising. Again, labor-intensive kind of program intervention more than just giving money, right? So that's one thing that we know about cash handout and so on. We are of the view, you know, you may know from the previous things that I've said, that cash transfers can be helpful, not just to keep people afloat, you know, and away from poverty, but also often giving them the enough breathing space then for looking for jobs or investing in their own children's education and so on. Evidence is very strong that if you give poor people sufficient amount of cash, but not too much, so much that they feel like they don't need to work. You don't want to do that. But if you give them enough that they feel safe, they feel secure, they can begin to take risks in their life, you know, in terms of job search and maybe training, skill build, building on a small scale. They often spend the money, especially when the money is in hands of mothers. Fathers, we have work to do, but mothers, right? They spend it on children's education, family health, the good things that also build human capital in the long run. So, we believe that the cash transfer properly managed and effectively delivered can be a very strong tool, not just to keep people, from poverty, but giving them opportunities and things to stand on. Right? So that's, I don't know if the government programs do that, but one last thing. We looked at the household income and expenditure survey data for 2019. It's once again in that report, okay? And the bottom 10%, B10, on average, was receiving around 10% of their income in cash assistance. 10%. Now, I don't know what you think of that, whether that's enough, too little, too much. In upper middle income countries, on average, the ratio is about 20 to 25%. So at least in comparison, it's low here, right? As YB Kian Min said, the actual impact depends on family circumstances and so on. So, it's not one size fits all, but at least at the macro level comparison, it looks to us that maybe Malaysia's cash transfer could actually be more, a bit more generous. And this is the concept we call adequacy level. Adequacy is low in Malaysia when it comes to cash transfer. Now, the international financial institutions and grants and so on, look, you don't want grants. You don't need grants. I forgot who the person who asked the question was. As a society, you're wealthy enough, then grants that are available are not going to make any difference for Malaysia. It's tiny. International grants that are available for poor countries run in the tune of $50 million, not a year, 5-year project and so on. So that's what 50 million is like 200 million, 250 million ringgit, right? You have 400 billion budget, right? So that's not where your focus should be. Now, it would be beneficial, I think, because we are from the World Bank, if Malaysia could stay engaged with the international, aid architecture and so on, because you can represent voices of middle-income countries in fora. But, in terms of the financial flows, I hope you agree that whatever resources that are available, and they're limited globally, should go more toward low-income countries, where the needs are much, much greater.
I think with all this, right, the notion of green growth is pretty important, and I find that very interesting as well, because as we all, as Malaysia, we have this net zero target as early as 2050. The country is really moving and shifting in different ways. So let's say we talk about SMEs, right? So they are also transition finance that supports SME to support them, not just to tap onto all these green growth opportunities, but also to capacitate them, to also bring them to the point that the business does not, the trade is not just limited to domestically, but also to have international trades as well. So all these green growth opportunities are there, and they are, like what he has mentioned also, how can we capacitate them to access to all these financing opportunities, to access to all this, let's say, capacity building. So even UN Global Compact, there's a series of information available on how SMEs can tap into it. But the question is, do they know, do they have the time to also do that? And I think green growth, the kind of concept, is also very practical for, let's say, Aboriginal people, indigenous, to manage our natural resources as assets, and also to help them, let's say we have carbon markets, right? And how can we also make sure that we can capacitate our local people to be involved into all these green growth opportunities? So I think there's so much out there under this notion of green growth, and Malaysia is moving towards there. So I think there's a pretty positive outlook. It's just the access to information, the willingness to learn, and also to grow as well as individuals as well as companies. Yeah.
Thank you so much to all of the panels for answering the questions. Can we take on the questions with the participants that are standing up? After that, we won't be taking any more questions, okay? So, yes, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Nif Yang. I'm a political science student from Huaqiao University from China. I actually carrying a lot of leaderheads. I leading my own yayasan foundations Royal Chamber, and also international NGO, and also political-based NGO. As I knew, the PwC, right, you have your own academic. So I would like to know whether there is any chance for us to work in hand with PwC. And my second question is for the Dr. Yasuhiko. As I know, World Bank have their own sustainability courses. So I would like to know, is there any extension or maybe future planning that you will have the grant or funding, to support all this? But I mean grassroots, NGO-based or maybe yayasan-based. Besides that, I want to ask one question. Is there any chance for this ESG trends, to push for maybe cryptocurrency for ESG, digital bank for ESG purpose? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Shall we collect the questions, or would you like to answer? Okay, we will collect the questions, yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, sir and madam, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sebastian Yu, and I am from International Subang. My question would be revolving around the Sino-US competition. So according to the ISEAS, the Yusof Ishak Institute State of Southeast Asia annual survey, the United States is ASEAN's largest trading partner with $145.9 billion, while the Chinese are at $107.7 billion. My question to everyone would be, in these troubling times, as what is what Sir and Madam's opinions on how can Malaysia make use of the strategic rivalry between China and the US, and how do we navigate ourselves to look out for our best interests in order to get the best outcome from the foreign direct investment? Thank you.
Yeah, next question.
Hello, my name is Stanley Wong. I am a representative from the United Kingdom and Malaysian Law Students Union. First and foremost, I want to thank Heya for inviting us here today. So my question is that, we see both in this budget and amongst the current market, ESG is being a very popular objective for corporations and even SMEs to adopt. However, it also poses the risk of greenwashing and misleading sustainable goals, which could affect consumer confidence in certain products and the market as a whole. While statutes such as the Malaysian Code of Advertising Practice and the Consumer Protection Act regulate such claims, it is also true that enforcement is not necessarily the strongest. As such, my question is, how can we consumers build back confidence and tackle the issue of greenwashing? Thank you very much.
Alright, hi, my name is Yuki. I'm from Taylor's University, Bachelor of Mass Communication, Honours in Digital Media Production. Sorry, that's very long to say. Alright, so my question is regarding gig economy. Because I believe everyone here has experience with gig economy, right? Whether you're on the receiving end or you're on the giving end, working as a rider or as a person who order Food Panda every day. I myself has been both. I order Food Panda and I'm being a Lala Move driver for some time back then. And the thing I want to ask is that the rising number of students, of youth, of people who just graduated SPM and then straight away becoming Food Panda rider, Grab Food rider, and they are not going for any like tertiary educations like TVET or colleges or universities. Like the increasing numbers of these students going for gig economies is like, it's very concerning lah. Like whether does the next generation of these Gen Zs, of these SPM graduates, like if they are not going for courses or going to increase their skills, taking courses in university, colleges and things like this, in the next few decades, who are going to fill the position of the like, let's say, engineers, lawyers? We require manpower in this field as well, and there's nobody there to fill that in. Then how should we prevent this from happening, and what should the government do? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll get the ball rolling by answering two questions. Sebastian's question on US-China rivalry and how Malaysia can benefit, and then also to address what Yuki has said just now about the gig economy. With regards to US-China, I think Malaysia is already benefiting from this. You get a lot, of additional announcements on the FDI front that you've already read in the news, Infineon, Intel, some Chinese companies have also upped their investment amounts here in Malaysia, and many new ones are coming in. So in regards to this area, I would say a couple of things. Firstly, Malaysia's investment policy needs to be clear in terms of the kind of investments that we want and the kind of investments that we may not want to be situated in Malaysia. Right, so there are areas where, yes, Chinese companies are interested to move in, but if let's say they are in areas where it's going to be highly polluting, right? So for example, if let's say another large steel manufacturer will want to come into Malaysia, I think that may not necessarily be the best use of our resources, and also may not be so good for our domestic steel industry as well. But if you are coming in, investing in high tech, you're investing in E&E, some of the preferred sectors that's been identified by MITI under the National Investment Aspirations, I think those are fine and good. So we need to have good policy alignment. Secondly, in this area, I also think that we need to be very strategic and careful in terms of how we want to sell Malaysia. Sell Malaysia in the sense that we want to pitch the investment climate here in such a way that we want more investments to come, but we also don't want to be caught up with regards to US trying to punish, let's say, Chinese companies that are operating here in Malaysia because they are basically taking in goods that are made in China, rebadging them, and then selling them to the US and Europe. So we need to be very vigilant in this area so that we can maintain our reputation as a good place for reputable companies to do business. So that kind of trend will continue, and we'll look forward to more announcements on the part of MITI, MADANI, and the Malaysian government in this regard. With regards to Yuki's question, I think you need to have some context with regards to the choice parameters that people who graduate from SPM faces. Just to let you guys know, in any single cohort, only about 50% of a cohort would go from SPM to pursue higher education, whether it is A-levels, whether it's TVET, whether it's university, right? So your question needs to be more fine-grained in the sense that, let's say, among the 50% who choose not to pursue higher education for whatever reason, if let's say the gig economy actually gives them opportunities to earn a higher wage than they normally would be able to get without the gig economy, that may not necessarily be a bad thing. And of course, I think the government is trying its best to encourage, for example, companies like Foodpanda and Grab to be able to offer better insurance coverage, accident coverage. The government has also done quite a bit in terms of helping those people who need assistance to get some of these licenses for driving Grab cars and whatnot and vehicles. Especially those who are doing motorcycle delivery to help those out. So there are things that are already being done. I think the gig economy is here to stay. Probably the more interesting part for me would be, let's say, as an in-between, TVET. Because this is one area where I think not enough has been done in terms of trying to show that TVET can be a very attractive area to go into that can potentially lead to high-paying jobs. So, for example, if let's say you want to be trained as a crane operator in a high-rise construction building setting, if you are trained well in this area, you can easily earn 10, 20, 30,000 ringgit a month because the demand for these kind of specialized skills is very high, right? But maybe there's not been enough publicity to tell people that these are options available. So there's a lot of these kinds of very specialized TVET training which probably need to have better industry publicity, better industry and TVET linkages, which the government I think always has had trouble showing the way. And if let's say these kinds of options are highlighted to those who may choose the gig economy, and to let them know actually you can earn even more if you have these kinds of opportunities and training made available to you, then I think a lot more can be done. I was just talking to the COO of an initiative called Code 42 or 42 School that aims to provide coding lessons to those who have graduated from SPM. And for many of these guys who actually have interest in coding, but they don't want to go into a traditional university setting, after 1 or 2 years with these kinds of coding schools, they can easily earn, 3, 4, 5,000 ringgit, maybe even more as programmers if let's say they are good. Right, so I think these are the options that need to be highlighted, need to be put on the table, so that young people can have more options available to them, which will eventually lead to better paying jobs over time.
Thank you, Prof. Ong, for answering the questions. Maybe Ms. Beatrice can add in, particularly the PwC. I think she directed it to you.
You are welcome to chat with me after this on the PwC Academy. Yeah, so maybe I'll just address the part on greenwashing. I think right now, because we always have this connotation that companies are always greenwashing based on what they report. So recently I had a conversation with the communications department of a huge oil and gas company, and they were under scrutiny because of their advertisement overseas, and that they are accused of greenwashing. So the struggle that companies like that face as well is that, to what extent do they disclose? They want to disclose that they are moving towards, let's say, net zero, or they are moving towards something. But the more they disclose, the more, because of transparency, the more they're exposed to all this criticism as well. So how do you balance that? I think that is something that companies are still sort of like figuring out as well. But I think when I talk to many companies, so sort of like sustainability department and all those things, I think there is sincerity there. But how do you know if a company is really into ESG or all this sustainability stuff? You talk to the CFO. If the finance officer is talking in the same language as a sustainability officer, you know what the company and how the company is moving towards too. So there's always a difference in that. And of course, when you read all these sustainability reports and stuff, so there is a difference in terms of reports that are assured, so which means reports that are audited. So if you are audited, then they will come and check. It's something like financial reports as well, like whether you are audited. So there is measures to sort of like reduce the risk of greenwashing, but of course companies are sort of like still figuring out to what extent they want to report, and how do we help them as well to report responsibly. So there are all these kind of like initiatives to rate reports also. Yeah, so I think that's that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, also on greenwashing, it sounds like sort of an evil act of sort of companies trying to hide their true bad intention kind of thing. And there are probably, companies trying to kind of disguise the extent of their dirty industrial behavior and so on. But there's a fundamental challenge for everybody, as Beatrice said, even if you wanted to do it. And one is the classification, what's the taxonomy. So what activities count as green in what way? And there's no clear definition in place yet, at least for Malaysia, and there's no set of definitions that are consistent across countries. And EU has come up with detailed taxonomy, and I hear that to apply that in Malaysia it's very difficult, because people need to be trained to assess whether certain activities meet in that part of taxonomy or this part of taxonomy and so on. So the regulators like McNegara and Securities Commission have been working on this thing and trying to develop a taxonomy that works both in Malaysia and ideally also at least across ASEAN. So that's one, and then related to that, what the very esoteric but data catalog. What are the kinds of data that you need to assess the climate impact of economic activities? And again, the regulators are looking into this. So there are efforts underway, but once those definitions have been set, then they need to be socialized, made publicly available, and then disseminated, and then internalized by all the economic actors, corporate actors. And so, there are some steps that need to be followed, but that's, one key aspect of minimizing greenwashing, and work is underway. But it'll take, I think, a little bit of time for that to be really a robust mechanism that can be applied across the board. So that is on greenwashing. U.S.-China, I don't have a huge amount to add to what Prof. Kiamin said. It is at the moment an opportunity for a country like Malaysia. So some investments are flowing. In the long run, it's bad news for the entire world, right? And there's no denying it. But then as countries see the negative side of it and try to close up, then it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy, And so Malaysia is one of the economies that has benefited from open global economy. And, it should be a part of Malaysia's responsibility as a mature, emerging economy to continue to advocate for openness of the economic interactions among nations. While at the same time, because you have the right to take advantage of the opportunities that come before you, especially if you're a private firm. And there, one thing I read recently, others may have read it, that one of the things that the investors are looking for as they move out of China, obviously, is talent. Malaysia has comparative advantage in some of the areas like E&E in particular, right? But even there, I met somebody, a Malaysian, working in Singapore, but used to work in China for a semiconductor industry. Right? And his company is pulling out of China because of this tension. And then he told me that his company was actually looking at Malaysia and Thailand and was leaning toward Thailand in semiconductor. That was a surprise to me. And the reason is talent. Simply because Thailand has more larger population, and its basic education level, by one measure at least, is stronger than in Malaysia. We have, World Bank has measured this thing called learning poverty, which is the ability of 10-year-olds or so to read and do simple math. And 40% of Malaysian kids can't do it at the level expected. In Thailand, it's about 20-something. Singapore, 3-something, okay? So there's a huge gap there. So there's a knock-on effect of generational impact of this quality of education that translates to the pool of talents. Combined with the larger population, then you are actually somewhat disadvantaged. So that's something that the country needs to work on to reverse. The other one is the availability of sustainability. So they want to come and make their investments green. Greenwashing and so on relates to that, right? So they want to come and engage in green investments and green economic activities. So is Malaysia ready for it? Is there financing for it? Are there people who know how to do this? Are there technologies ready for it? So, those are the two things that, two of the things that the investors fleeing China are looking for. Now, there was a question about the World Bank. What was it? Sorry. Grants for NGOs. Globally, we do. Here in Malaysia, we do not manage any of those things. So, but I believe there are some grants, including one or two that have been given to NGOs or often in partnership with UN agencies here in Malaysia. So, if you contact us, we can give you some additional details. Okay.
I think the only questions left unanswered is actually regarding the possibilities of ESG combining with cryptocurrency. Yes. I think would any of the speakers would like to answer that?
I'll be very honest to admit that I don't really know much about cryptocurrency, although there's a lot about, what's it called, blockchain and stuff like that. But I can talk about ESG and digitalizations and cybersecurity. So for example, recently I also had a conversation on energy security in terms of, what's that called, even as we move towards renewable energy and all these things, we are also more reliant on data. And so putting securities and safeguards on cybersecurity and how energy systems are as our critical infrastructure is also pretty important. So one of our colleagues did a work in the UK on assessing the cybersecurity in critical infrastructure such as energy infrastructure. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm sorry that I can't answer you much about cryptocurrency, but I'm going to learn more about it.
Thank you so much for our speakers. Because I think all of us have already full in our stomach and full in our mind, and of course I see a few faces that are sleeping. So we will be doing some more activities and brainstorming and discussions after this in our breakout rooms. With that, I thank all of our speakers for our session today. I will give back to the MCs. We will have like a few giving us like certificates giving ceremony. But
Thank you, Ms. Shamim, and thank you to all of our speakers for the insightful session. We request that the speakers to remain seated as our president will be giving out the certificates to the speakers. We invite Mr. Wei Zihao, accompanied by Ms. Helen Wong, to come forward to present the certificates to our distinguished speakers. We would like to begin by inviting our first distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Ong Kian Ming, to receive his certificate. Next, we welcome Ms. Beatrice Chong. And finally, we welcome Mr. Yasuhiko Matsuda. Thank you, Mr. Uy and Ms. Kalin Wong. Now, let us have a group photo session together with our budget town hall speakers. We invite all the participants to come to the middle for our group photo. We would like to request participants to stand at the staircase beside the middle seats, as it would fit our frame. Thank you to all our participants and speakers. Dear participants, we request that you please remain at the hall. Now the event will be followed by a thematic breakout session. Participants will proceed to your breakout room of choice during the registration. In case you would like to double check, you can do so by referring to the email that was just sent out, or please proceed to the registration counter to check your breakout room